just inside the final furlong. It's Diamond Show from Torino under strong pressure. Easter Sun and Amindus weakening under pressure. But now Diamond Show is storming away. Diamond Show forging clear. At the line, Diamond Show the winner. Easter Sun is second. Torino third.
So we know how the Baldings arrived on the planet. We know how you got to the UK. We know some of the top horses you've trained. But jockeys, particularly Toby with you, have been a great part of your life, creating champions. We all know, I think anyone watching this show will know that you almost found AP McCoy once he came to the UK from Jim Bolger's. Ian's had great jockeys. But Andrew, let's start with you, because you found William Buick. David Probert's doing very well for you. So you're carrying on the tradition, the Balding tradition in many ways. Yeah,
well, Dad had great success with his apprentices, and obviously Martin Dwyer had started as my stable jockey. He was homegrown. And when Martin took the job as second jockey to Hambam, we had a sort of bit of a void. And at the time, William Buick had started with me 5 stone, 7 pounds or whatever he was, and David Probert at the same time. So we had these 2 good kids coming and no real senior stable jockeys. So they got going probably quicker than they usually would. And, you know, Will, I still remember when he came and rode holidays here when he was 14, literally we had to give him a stone weight cloth because otherwise the horses would think they're loose. You know, so he'd had the probably 2 stone weight cloth, big saddle, which he couldn't carry around the yard then. So we had to have someone, when he was stacking up, carrying his saddle from yard and putting it on the horse. But I think he probably, what is he now? Probably minimum weight 8'8". But at the time he was, you know, he was tiny weeny, but a natural talent and a great guy. You know, he's absolutely always been.
There was a fear that he was too small, wasn't it? That was perhaps even the initial.
Absolutely, yeah. And I remember when he had his first ride on Tiny Tim at Brighton. I mean, he looked like a, you know, like a little boy. I think it was probably an apprentice race, but he was, you know, you hoped he'd grow a bit, but you know, he was always just, he could change his whip hand quick as a flash at the age of 14. Very good horseman, you know, brave, tactically aware, and, you know, a good kid. And he and David came through together. They were joint champion apprentices, and, you know, I think David should be very proud of what he's achieved as well. You know, it's not obviously got on the same calibre of horse as William's been on, but I think he, you know, in time he could be very good as well.
For a young person to go there, wanting to be a jockey, it's you learn from scratch, and it's, you know, you learn how to ride from the basics, and I think it's fantastic. And the gallops there are, some of them are quite demanding, you know. So you need to know the gallops. You need to learn how to keep a horse balanced and all that. And they give you they kind of give you responsibility. So they put you in the work on a little bit of challenging horse, and they don't worry about it. They just leave you at it. And of course I got it wrong plenty of times riding work. Got run away with and all that, carry on. But the next day they'll do the same again until you get it right. And I think that's very important. And you know, they're a fantastic family, and they looked after me like one of their own. And you know, I've said before, I can't be more thankful for the apprenticeship I had there, and it was a big part of my growing up stage.
If Buick wasn't champion one day, would you be stunned?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much about being champion jockey. The number of winners, I don't think, is as important as the calibre of winners. It's rather like when we were talking about training racehorses. The number of races to me isn't important. It's being remembered by the good ones. You know, the big races are what counts. And, you know, William's ridden, 7 or 8 Group 1 winners this year? I mean, that to me is, you know, more important than riding 150 winners, you know. So, you know, the title champion jockey might, you know, he might not be that interested in it. I'm sure if he wanted to give it a go, he's capable of doing it. But you know, I think he'd be pretty pleased with his lot at the moment.
Here's Morley Street produced on the inside now, putting in his claim from Upton Park. One to jump. King's Curate back in the lead now from Danny Harrell. Here's Morley Street on the inside, being popped the question now. He races to the lead on the inside. It's Morley Street and King's Curate settle down to fight it out. The champ gets his head in front. He's a half length clear. King's Curate fighting back. Morley Street in front, and he's too good for them, Morley Street. Morley Street goes on to win it a half length to King's Curate.
We were talking about Morley Street earlier on with Toby, and you're a trainer now, but you rode Morley Street a couple of times on the gallops. When you rode a horse like that, did he give you a good feel, or what was he like to ride?
It's just amazing. We were talking about it earlier. I have never had a sensation like that. It was like getting And this was when probably Morley Street was past his best. He'd had I think he'd started bleeding or something like that. This was after he won the Sandyman with Brad riding, and I think he'd had some sort of problem, but he'd come back into training.
After the big entry race with Granville again.
Yeah, and maybe he'd had a season off, but he'd come back, and he was probably 11 or 12 even at the time. But I got to ride him a few mornings, and this morning Uncle Toby said, right, you can give him a bit of work today. And it was like stepping out of a Mini, which was your normal car, to getting into a sports car. I mean, it was sensational. And the other horse, actually, interestingly, the other probably good horse I got to ride at home was at Tristan Davis's, was Arctic Kinsman. Oh, yeah. Probably wasn't quite as good as, obviously we're nowhere near as good as Morley Street, but you get that same sensation off a good horse, and it's literally like getting into from a normal car to a sports car. I mean, the difference is extraordinary.
So for young David now, your job is to try and find horses like that for them to sit on at Kingscliff.
Yeah, and it's not easy. I mean, Morley Street, Uncle Toby's trained 40 years and he had one Morley Street. So it's not that easy, but that's what we'll try and do.
It's on the outside, Durham Edition that's putting the challenge. Durham Edition with Last of the Riders on the inside, and Little Paul Vere is up there too. And it's Little Paul Vere on the inside with the Thinker making ground. And it's Little Paul Vere as they race up towards the elbow. It's Little Paul Vere in the lead, but Durham Edition puts in a challenge. The Thinker, the top weight in the orange, is coming there strongly. So too is West Tip coming with a run. And they hit the elbow. And it's Little Paul Vere with West Tip powering on the far side, and the Thinker on the near side. Little Paul Vere hampered by the loose horse, but that one still has it. And Little Paul Vere holds on from West Tip, and then back in third place is the Thinker. Last of the Riders in 4, and Little Paul Vere wins the Grand National. Little Paul Vere the winner.
Toby Loxong was a ball of speed for Ian. Little Paul Vere, probably the opposite, but another horse that you really freshened up, because when he came for you, he'd had a few hard races. You got him right again.
Yes, I mean, I really almost feel that I have no right to claim him, but
Claim him.
I had an order for the owner's son to ride in the Grand Military, and we bought him with that in mind. But we bought him with the national entry, John Edwards, who trained him previous to me and who'd actually been one of my pupils. John Edwards had advised Mr. Shone that he didn't really have a job for him anymore, and that they ought to try and get some cash for him. And Ted Harvey bought him for his son to ride in the Grand Military, which he did, and that was part of the rejuvenation, in that I always wanted to run him in the National, because I believed that he would have won the National previous to the one that he did, in that Tom Morgan rode him. And
this is a very similar story in a way to Highland Wedding.
We bought him, as I say, for the Grand Military, in which he ran, and then I gave him 2 more runs for his health, i.e. to let him enjoy himself. He'd been ridden by, I think it was Tom Morgan who rode him, and P. Scudamore rode him, and he was always ridden by very forceful jockeys, and he was idle basically, and consequently to achieve had to have hard races. And I just really set about spending, I think I had, if it was as much as 8 weeks, it was no more. But during that time, he had 2 runs, in both of which he enjoyed. And Jimmy Frost was riding for me at the time, and another very underestimated jockey. I mean, a lovely, lovely horseman. And founded a relationship immediately with Lucky Vane. And he just went to the start a totally revitalized horse, and pissed up. You know, he was a very easy winner. Yeah, he was a very easy winner. And I didn't back him. But that's neither here nor there. No, I mean, he was typical of a national type horse. I mean, he'd had experience round there. As I say, I thought he would have nearly won the previous national when John Edwards trained him, and when Tom Morgan got unseated off of him.
But he didn't, Toby. He won it when you trained him, and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Richard Dunwoody changes his hands on Morley Street. Granville again, travelling very powerfully towards the near side, just comes to take a fractional advantage now from Tower and Bridge, with Morley Street in third, and Granville again travelling very strongly at that bump, lands in the lead over the last, but Morley Street coming to challenge him, and it's Morley Street on the near side, Granville again on the far side, Morley on the near side, Granville again on the far side, Richard Dunwoody and Peter Scudamore and race up towards the line. It's going to be Morley Street, the champion hurdle is going to win another line. Morley Street is the winner, and Granville again in second and third. He's so risky, and four.
I guess if Ian trained Mill Reef, which he did, you train Morley Street, and class-wise, he would be Mill Reef's equivalent over jumps. Would that be fair?
He was an absolute amazing horse in that, as Andrew says, he was one of those absolutely natural athletes, and all came very easy to him. And to my grave, I will always regret not having made more use of him as a flat horse, because I only ran him at the back end of his jumping career. And I mean, he was beaten a short head in the Doncaster Cup. And all these races were really only used to get him ready for going to America, where he won the Breeders' Cup Chase 2 years running, and would have won it a third year running if the owner had let me go with him. But just of interest, the reason he didn't go was that, and sort of now I understand why, but the owner didn't enjoy the Breeders' Cup Chase because he couldn't share the moment with any of his friends. You know, they weren't there, so we went to Murano instead, where he ran a bugger, and entirely Brad's fault, because Brad had convinced me that we should go to Murano, where I'm actually going tomorrow, that he should go to Murano, because he said, "Here, Governor," I said, "Now, Brad, I don't know Murano from a bar of soap, you know, what's it like?" "Oh, lovely, great, big galloping track," he says. And I said, "Now, you sure?" "Oh, yes," he said, "we've got to be there, you know," because it was very good money. And a race that you'd have thought, having won the Breeders' Cup Chase 2 years running, or that's actually has been a very moderate race. Anyway, we get out there, and it made Newton Abbott look like Ascot. It was a terrible track, very, very sharp. Anyway, he didn't win. But no, I mean, he could have been, if I'd gone flat racing with him in the start of his career, because he won his bumper at Sandown, rather like all your stars did first time up. I mean, he won half the track, some boy called Tony Charlton rode.
Could have won a few Queen Alexandras.
Or even an Ascot Gold Cup, maybe.
I think if he'd been, you know, if he'd gone flat racing in his youth, you would have aimed him at a Gold Cup.
Tell you what, I could have seen him in a Melbourne Cup. I know it sounds bizarre, but he just had that turn of foot and travelling that might have been suited to a Melbourne Cup in the modern era. But he was a tremendous horse, and he obviously won the champion. Probably the race a lot of our viewers will remember, though, is the one at Aintree with his brother Granville again, and Brad just sitting there absolutely cruising, and Scoo slashing away at Granville. It was just one of those great races, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, people say what a great race Brad rode, but I actually bollocked him for going too soon. He was a bleeder, or certainly in the last third of his career, and the team did a very, very good job keeping him mentally able and prepared to give what you have to give to win races of this quality, you know. And he lived with it. He bled quite regularly. We tried the sort of Lasix, all that sort of nonsense, and that used to. I mean, you'd inject him with Lasix, and he'd do his bit of work, and he'd lose 21 kilos. You know, I mean, absolutely. You know, it's extraordinary how tough the racehorse can, mentally tough it can be, because if you were doing it to yourself, it would drive you mad. It didn't drive him mad. No, his achievements were, for me, magic, obviously.
He won the champion in '91. 2 years earlier, you'd run it with a horse with Beach Road, who I imagine, ability-wise, was probably the opposite to Morley Street, in that Morley Street had loads of natural ability. Beach Road would have been trickier, would that be fair?
Beach Road just wasn't that good, you know, he wasn't anywhere
So class in a different, although they won champion hurdles,
yes.
One's a brilliant champion hurdle winner, one's a champion hurdle.
Yeah, did very well to win the champion hurdle, Beach Road did. And of course we did very well to do it for. But he, no, he, you know, again, I was lucky enough to have the both of them.
Beach Road towards the near side. Beach Road, an unthought of horse, is striding up towards the line with the advantage from Mulbourne. Celtic Chief is finishing well, but it's Beach Road from Celtic Chief. Celtic Chief putting in a tremendous run. Beach Road from Celtic Chief. Beach Road has won it from Celtic Chief. And Cool Ground on the inside has come through to show with the fellow at the second last. And the fellow it was that time just the leader. The fellow from Cool Ground, Docklands Express. Carville's Hill is spent. Those jumping errors have cost him dear. The favourite's not going to win the Gold Cup. It could be the fellow. He's coming to the last. In front, the fellow from Docklands Express now on the outside. The fellow, Docklands Express, Cool Ground. It's going to be a three-way finish. They're locked together. The fellow who was runner-up last year, beaten the short head, has just got his head in front from Cool Ground and Docklands Express. Cool Ground fighting back on the inside. Cool Ground and Adrian Maguire. Cool Ground wins the Gold Cup for Adrian Maguire.
And what about the Gold Cup? Cool Ground in '92. I mean, Adrian Maguire is always picked out for giving the horse a very hard ride, but I imagine on the day you probably weren't too fussed by that, were you?
No, I wasn't at all, because he was a tough horse to ride. You know, he needed a lot of driving, he needed a lot of coaxing, and, you know, like it or not, some horses do respond to hard driving, and he was certainly one of those. There was no way I could ever say. I was absolutely convinced that if I was to win a proper race with him, it would be the National. But in fact, in winning the Gold Cup, I totally buggered up his chance of winning the National. We ran him in the National that particular year. Adrian wasn't able to ride
What, after winning the Gold Cup?
Yeah. And he finished 6th or 7th, but never looked like competing, because he'd had a bloody hard race in the Gold Cup, you know. And in those days, one actually didn't consider running Gold Cup winners back in the National. We really did it because P. Bolton, who was my sort of guru, master, well, landlord, but a good friend. He was a very good friend to me. Anyway, he ran an ordinary race in the National. But I never, as I say, I never thought he never showed me the sort of brilliance that I always would have expected of a Gold Cup winner, because I would have expected a Gold Cup winner to be like Morley Street. And although Morley was at Whitcomb, Cool Ground was just a good old, straightforward, staying chaser.